Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me. Today we're talking about a new watch from Aquastar. This is the return of the Benthos 500. Aquastar is a historic dive watch brand that existed from the 60s into the mid-70s. In that time, they developed over a dozen patents pertaining to some of the innovations that they brought to dive watches. Recreational diving was a very different scene back then compared to today, and was far more reliant on mechanical dive watches. At the head of the brand was recreational diver Frederick Robert. Now, this name might sound familiar to you from the Omega Ploprof review that we did. He had a hand in helping Omega develop the unique case and features of that watch. This was a pretty innovative guy, and he brought a lot of these solutions into Aquastar, and the result is some classic dive watches like the Deep Star, the Model 60, the Model 63, and of course the Benthos. The Benthos was unique for a few reasons. It was a diving chronograph that used a centrally mounted chronograph and a single pusher along the side of the case. That pusher could be used at depth too. This allowed the watch to retain maximum functionality without compromising the legibility of the dial, keeping things as clean as possible with no subdials or chapter rings or anything like that. Instead, there was just a single minute totalizer at the base of the hand stack. This meant timing was limited to just 60 minutes, but that's generally all that you'd really need it for anyway. Frankly, that's generally all we need it for these days as well. This is a great layout, and I really love the idea of a centrally mounted chronograph. I wish we had more of them today, but there's not really a movement that addresses that. Zinn, of course, has one in their EZM 1.1. They use a modified Valjoux 7750 for it. The original Zinn EZM1, of course, used the Lamagna movement, but that's a story for another day. Aquastar returned in 2020 with the Deep Star. They brought that watch back almost exactly as it was in the 60s. It took until this year, 2024, to see a new Benthos 500 return. Now, last year we saw our first look at a modern Benthos, but this was a time-only model, as they didn't have a movement that could support the centrally mounted chronograph function. This year that changes, as Aquastar worked with Lejeune Perret to develop a caliber capable of placing the centrally mounted chronograph in the movement. The result is the caliber 1 MPS in this Benthos 500, and it's almost exactly as it was when it first released in 1970, but a few small changes have been made. First of all, the pusher and the crown have swapped positions along the right-hand side of the case, and the new watch has shaved about a half a millimeter off of the thickness. The original watch was 16 millimeters thick. This one is 15.4 millimeters thick, so still not thin by any measure, but if you're looking for that, this really wasn't going to be the watch for you anyways. This watch has a towering mid-case that curves with the profile of your wrist. It's actually relatively comfortable for what it is, considering its size. It measures 43 millimeters in diameter and just 46 millimeters from lug to lug. So overall, there's not really any huge wearability issues with this watch, but it's still not for the faint of heart. It's still a pretty large watch, and it's not going to fill the same kind of role that a Pelagos 39 or a Zinn U50 is going to fill. As in, this probably won't be ideal for most people's everyday tool watch needs. What this watch really is a celebration of the heritage of Aquastar and one of the more unique and innovative designs. It represents something we rarely see today by bringing back the centrally mounted chronograph. It retains the unique design features that made that watch special in the first place. One other difference is the depth rating. Now, the original had a 500 meter depth rating, and the chronograph was still usable at that depth. This one, it's still called the Benthos 500, and the 500 is still on the dial, but the depth rating is 200 meters. And yes, the chronograph is still usable at that depth. The ISO standard around such things wasn't really put into place until the mid-90s anyways, so how they measure that stuff has changed a lot since the 60s. So I imagine that this watch is likely just as capable as the original. 200 meters is still plenty of depth resistance anyways. Now, this watch isn't perfect. The rotor is a bit noisy and it does have some wobble to it, and the crown is a little bit tricky to get out of the case unscrewed and pulled out, and the isoframe rubber strap is a bit cumbersome to put on and take off. That said, I really love what this watch represents, and I love the idea of this putting Aquastar and its history on more people's radar, which it deserves to be. Now, quick word about bringing back a watch as faithfully as they've done here. They don't really have anywhere to take this watch, and the original idea of Aquastar was innovation. So I would like to see them pick up that theme and carry it forward, and to really think of what would this watch have been like if it was developed today. I'd love to see the same kind of innovation put into things back in the 60s and 70s, used to develop a new line of watches today. As it is, this Benthos 500 does a wonderful job of preserving its history and the history of Aquastar as a whole. This watch is limited to just 300 units, and while the pre-order is done, there are some still available for shipping in June. This watch is priced at $3,790. I have a lot more of my thoughts on this watch now live at thedeeptrack.com. I'll leave a link to that down below. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so, and if you enjoyed this content, a like and a share goes a long way. Thanks so much for tuning in, and until next time, take care.